Today we're going to be taking a closer look at English as a medium of instruction, or EMI for short, and how to run an effective EMI classroom. We're going to start with an icebreaker now to get the episode going. As we're focusing on English as a medium of instruction today, we're asking our guests, what is your favourite English word or phrase and why? One of my favourites is petrichor, which is the smell of the earth after rain, because I love going on a rainy woodland walk. Karen, how about you?
I had to think very hard about this. It was quite difficult to decide, but I opted for onomatopoeia, being a word that's created by imitating the sounds. So a word like buzz or whoosh. I like it because it sounds like a nice word, but also it's universal, that all languages have onomatopoeic words, but the sounds differ across languages. So in English, dogs say woof, but in China, I believe they say wang. So yes, very interesting word and concept.
That's amazing. An excellent word. And I didn't know about the woof. As a dog owner, that particularly interests me. And what about you, Jen?
Oh, so when I read your message, the first word that popped into my head was discombobulate. And the reason I love this word is that it represents various aspects of my life, one of which is when I go to my local cafe in Sicily and I'm faced with an array of pastries and cannoli and cakes and ice cream, and I am totally discombobulated because I can't choose what to eat.
I can understand that struggle, and that is an excellent word. And how about Nivi? What's your word or phrase?
Yeah, I thought about it as well, and I chose burbling, which is the sound of flowing water, and I love that. So that is my word.
That's wonderful, and onomatopoeic as well, so that fits in really well. And what about you, Roxy?
I've gone for a phrase for this one, and it's something that my children, who are really keen on kind of new phrases in the English language, are always telling me. And this one is spill the tea. And the meaning of this is gossip. So you might say, can you spill the tea about the party last night? And I like it because as English speakers, we're always famous for drinking tea, and it makes me happy that tea is a popular phrase for a new generation.
That's brilliant. I'm going to have to start using that, given that I drink a lot of tea, and right now, in fact. Fantastic. Okay, so let's get on to the main body of the podcast. So, as we know, many learners in Cambridge or international programs speak English as an additional language. It might be their second or perhaps their third language, and students may study all or some subjects in English, depending on the school. What do you think are the main opportunities and benefits for schools that choose to use English as a medium of instruction? So, Roxy, let's start with you.
I think one of the key benefits for me is that when you're learning using English as your medium of instruction, you're learning more than just the language. You're learning ideas and ways of thinking and the wider perspective of the world that doesn't necessarily come from English language teaching, but from just using English in different contexts in the classroom. So I think that's a real opportunity to be had for schools. In terms of benefits, I think you can see faster progress when you're using English in different contexts in the school, especially in countries where English is not as widely spoken, maybe at home or at work, and so children are only exposed to English in the classroom. This can be a really good way to get more practice, more experience in using English in authentic contexts.
Brilliant. Thank you, Roxy. Now, Nivi, what are your thoughts?
To add on to what Roxy said, I think students who study through the medium of English language are better prepared for higher education. Proficiency in English acquired through English medium study can better prepare students for higher education in English-speaking countries or institutions that offer programs in English. Another advantage that I see is of joining a global community of schools. So there's increased collaboration, there's access to international opportunities where these students can collaborate with students in other English medium schools or across countries. And that broadens the horizons for both students and their educators.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nivi. And Karen, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I think building on those points, it's an opportunity for students to become very competent multilinguals. So it's a case of promoting proficiency in English, but also in addition to their first language and the other language skills that they have. And that's something that there is quite a lot of evidence to show that learners who speak more than one language and use more than one language have improved cognitive skills and academic skills. They're looking at things from different perspectives. They're processing information more deliberately, which can also link to metacognition or teaching them how to think about things in different ways. So I think the language skills are really important across their different languages.
Fantastic, thank you. And now, Jen, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, again, I suppose to add on to what Karen's just been saying. So I'm going to bring in the word translanguaging. Not everybody agrees with this, but I sometimes think that in EMI context, it really brings the opportunity for schools, both teachers and students, to enrich the linguistic environment of the classroom and allow students to begin to experiment with and use their different competencies according to the language that they have at their disposal. So there is a school of thought that says in an EMI classroom that you want to keep it purely English or the language medium of instruction. But I would say that if anybody's prepared to embrace translanguaging, it will make for a richer learning experience for all.
Thanks, Jen. Could you just give us a definition of what translanguaging is?
Yeah, do you know, I've been asked to do that so many times. I'm going to make a comparison with what we call content and language integrated learning. So content and language integrated learning is when the teacher is teaching the subject matter as well as English input as well. Whereas in the EMI classroom, the teacher's not doing that. They are teaching the language, if you like, in the first language. And the translanguaging aspect of it is allowing students to access different languages to say something in a way they wouldn't necessarily say it in their first language. So it's that opportunity, if you like, to draw on those resources. It can be in emerging EMA classrooms a useful way of allowing students to engage and support them, but ultimately we're looking for them to use those linguistic resources to have a richer means of expressing themselves.
Okay, thank you. And Nivi, did you have a thought about that?
Yes, I just wanted to ask Jen a question on that. And that is, so as a teacher, I taught a lot of students who came from different countries and who could not speak English at all. So we did use CLIL approach, but there were times when in the classroom you had to go back to their mother tongue and try to explain things to them using mother tongue in English so that they could build that bridge, and understand the concept. Would that also be called as kind of translanguaging? Because I came to know this term very late, but I guess we were using it in the school long before.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because I think translanguaging I know I've been to a couple of lectures on this where there's been a big debate between that and code switching. And code switching was this idea of switching between languages. And I always used to suggest to me that was translanguaging too. But code switching tends to be often when people need to switch to be able to say what they need to say. Whereas translanguaging is more about using it because you feel you can say it differently. The only way I can describe that is my second language is Italian, and sometimes I find that I could say something in Italian which I just can't say it the same way in English. So that would be the case. But I think in new emerging EMI situations, I think there is a role potentially for their first or their most confident language to come into play while the EMI, if you like, is going through its inception.
Those are very interesting answers all. Thank you. Now, moving on from the benefits and opportunities, let's think. What are the potential challenges and how would you suggest we overcome them? Jen, let's start with you.
Okay. So I'm thinking back to a program I was involved in the Middle East with a ministry, and they wanted to bring in EMI, and we had quite a lot of pushback from teachers. For a number of reasons. One was that there were teachers who were very confident teachers of science or maths, but their own language skills in English were quite low level. And so there was quite a fear factor that they would be able to do that. So that can be a challenge that needs to be overcome, and you need to find a way to bring the teachers on board, upskill them and empower them. So in that instance, when we carried out needs analysis to find out who had lower levels, we then put in place really supportive programs to try and get past that hurdle and bring them on board.
Interesting. So how do you do a needs analysis, and what is a needs analysis?
So in needs analysis is, so you need to basically gather some data and do some research. So you need to go out to the teacher cohort. We went out to the teacher cohort, and we gave them some evaluation tasks to do, so we could ascertain what their proficiency was in English using the CFR framework as our benchmark. But we also asked them questions to try and gauge their openness to the concept of EMI and their attitudes towards it. And it was interesting to see what came back. In some cases, I think there was a feeling that somehow they were being asked to embrace someone else's culture and they didn't feel that was necessary. And there's, at the moment, we've got a lot of decolonization going on, haven't we, at the moment, where we're a lot of contexts, whether it's Africa, the Middle East, North Africa, Asia, there's a big development gone on in their own education context, and they maybe feel they don't need someone else's way of doing things. So again, that was one of the issues that we had to come up against, but we needed to know about during our needs analysis so that we could then address it.
Wonderful, thank you. Now, Karen, what do you think about this?
I think actually building on Jen's point there, you were talking, Jen, about teachers maybe not feeling confident with their English language skills, and that's obviously potentially a really important challenge in terms of helping them to build up the language skills and also the confidence. But I think there's something more than that as well, and I think it's once they have those skills in English and in the content subject, it's also seeing themselves having that dual role. And it comes back to that point before about the content and language coming together. And so there's the phrase that we come across all the time, this sense that every teacher is a language teacher. And I think that's true in all contexts, but I think it's particularly important in EMI settings. And I think that for many teachers, that can be something of a culture shift and a mind shift as well, especially for teachers thinking, well, I'm a science teacher and, I know all about the scientific concepts. I'm not here to teach English specifically, but building up those skills as well in terms of, or the confidence to address that and think, okay, well, we're using complex terms here. How do I teach that vocabulary? And that might involve coming back to that point about translanguaging as well, making connections to terms and concepts that the students know in their other language and scaffolding that learning in different ways. So I think the challenge could be absolutely supporting teachers to develop those skills in English, but also to then see themselves as being language teachers as well as content teachers. And that's, maybe not, takes a little bit of time and takes a little bit of support.
Thank you. That was really clear. Some great ideas there. And Nivi, what do you think about this question?
Yes. In addition to what Jen and Karen has said, I would like to add another point, and that is also even in the schools who are successfully running English medium instruction, teachers do lack the awareness and professional development on managing bilingual learners. So like technical terms, the difference between subject-specific language or academic language, what we say, and the language of common communication that children learn is very different. So something like we call BICS and CALP, and I'll just tell you what those are. So basic interpersonal communication skills, which we call as BICS for short, and then cognitive academic language proficiency, which is CALP in bilingual terminology. I think many teachers lack this understanding of the difference. So when a non-native English speaker student comes and talks to you, normally you think that they will be able to grasp the concept in the class, but actually they don't. They're not able to do that. So here what Karen said, that planning those lessons very carefully from subject content as well as language point of view is very important. And I faced this for many years because in my classroom, I'm a chemistry teacher. And I had students from Thailand, I had students from Korea, I had students from Northeast India who had varying levels of English proficiency. Some of them didn't speak at all, so it was very challenging navigating that classroom, because you also have very fluent English speakers, and to manage different levels of English in the same class it can be quite challenging for teachers if they do not have proper training.
Fascinating. Do you have some interesting examples of how you overcame those challenges? Because that does sound like an interesting scenario where you have students who weren't able to speak at all.
Yes, so I had a group of students from Korea who were really prodigies when it came to math and logic and music. But when they would sit and write a science paper, IGCSE combined science paper, they would struggle. So, like Karen mentioned, we had to use a lot of teaching aids, pictures, graphs, repetitions, make them understand and then make them learn. So, but it did require a lot of time. So, many times we would stay back after the school hours because they were all boarders, and we would sit with them separately and help them understand that this figure means this word, so you have to remember that. And it's difficult for students who are already 14 to 15 years of age, even 16, to start learning English at that stage, and so their achievement is not at par with the other students who have been learning English from, let's say, a very young age. So we did struggle with that, and there was always this barrier. But once they understood, they just ace it, because like the skills you develop when you study multiple languages, you can, it makes you more flexible cognitively. So, but it takes time for them to reach there.
That's brilliant. It must have been wonderful seeing that moment of comprehension when it finally dawned.
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Now, Roxy, what are your thoughts?
I'm really just going to build on everything everyone said here, because it's clear that the challenge in these classrooms is the range of language level that we're working with in the class. We've got children who are grouped by age rather than ability a lot of the time. So you do have every child from beginners in English, all the ones to those who are more fluent than the teacher. And this puts the teacher in a really vulnerable situation where they find that some of the children in the class might be able to communicate much more effectively than they can. They're not necessarily the expert in the room, which as a teacher, you're used to being that fountain of knowledge that everybody is looking to you to provide. So it can be quite scary to be a teacher in that position where you're not the expert. But I think this is a real opportunity for teachers as well to show that level of vulnerability, to say, look, we all have things that we're not going to be the best at, but working together in the room, we can really make the most of each other's skills. And I think that's where professional development can come in to really support teachers to see how you can effectively use English and all the knowledge and skills in the classroom to make this a really collaborative environment.
That's a lovely idea, effectively working with vulnerability as well. Brilliant, thank you. Some great answers there. Now, as we know, more schools are wanting to introduce bilingual teaching due to the benefits we outlined above. So let me present you with a scenario. You're approached by a school where English is not their first language. They are interested in beginning to teach in English. So what would be your advice to this school on how to start? So, Roxy, let's start with you.
Okay, so we're going to take quite a methodical approach to this. So first of all, we want the school to really think about where they are currently in their journey, like assessing the levels of the students, of the teachers, the knowledge that they have. So really doing lots of information, fact-finding, gathering at the first stage. And then thinking about where gaps might be in the school and what they might need to do in order to progress in this bilingual journey. So they might have some experts within the school that they can utilise to start to think about professional development support internally, or there might be areas where they need to outsource that professional development, that support, looking around for other areas. And then when we think about the language levels, we're going back to that vulnerability area. do teachers need to improve their English language ability before they feel confident to teach in the classroom? Maybe they need to go to a local language school and start to do some language classes or study an online course just to improve confidence. Once the school feels they're at a level where they've got English language ability, they've got the teaching experience that they need in order to start teaching in English, then perhaps choosing one subject is a good place to start. Think about a subject that people feel confident in teaching in English, maybe branching into an area that's interesting for other reasons, like a global perspective subject, for example, which is less pressured in some respects and might give students opportunities to discuss it in a comfortable environment. So I think those steps might help a school to start to think about planning their journey and moving into teaching in English.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, Nivi, what are your suggestions?
Yeah, just building on what Roxy said, needs analysis is the first step. And then I think a school should have a clear language policy. So when we started offering Cambridge in our school, one of the first steps was to create a language policy around use of different languages in school. So it was generally agreed that English would be the dominant language of communication. However, the native language of students should also not be neglected, because that's what scaffolds them in learning new languages. So I think that is really important. And the second thing, which is very important, is training. So like we've been saying, for teachers to undergo proper training to be able to teach through two languages is very, very important and non-negotiable. So Cambridge offers a lot of trainings in this area, and we did these trainings, and they make all the difference to how you approach this in your classroom and, deliver the best teaching and learning experience for students who are not confident in English.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Now, Karen, what do you think?
I think just to build on Nivi's point as well about the school language policy, I think that's such an important thing for schools to think about, and in lots of different ways. I mean, absolutely, in terms of language use in the classroom, what are the expectations, and how is that message put across to students as well? I came across an example of a policy, and this was, I was very sad to see this. It was explicitly written on the school's website, but it said, all talking should be subject related and in English only in uppercase. Students should be reprimanded for speaking in other languages. And I thought, oh, no. And we can see where that is coming from often, this desire to obviously encourage students to use English, but thinking about coming to that point that we had before about Jen's point about translanguaging or the value that other languages can play. And I suppose acknowledging that and thinking, okay, we encourage use of English in the classroom, but we acknowledge that students will draw on their first language or other language resources to help them to be able to complete those tasks. What about outside the classroom as well? When students are having lunch, or if it's a boarding context, what about in boarding houses? What are the messages there about language use? And that's a conversation to have, I think, among staff. Also getting student perspectives as well, and that can be really important. Building then as well into thinking about what teachers are focusing on in terms of assessment. So we think about assessment, I suppose we use that term a lot in terms of what we're preparing students for, but coming to that question of what are we assessing? Are we assessing predominantly the content? To what extent are teachers focusing on the language? What are the shared experiences or expectations of the students on that point, on that perspective as well? So having all of those discussions, so around language policy in different settings, in the classroom, outside of the classroom, assessment, even potentially communication with parents as well. And I think those discussions early on in that journey are really important.
Absolutely, those are some very interesting points. And I think, Nivi, you had a thought on that.
Yes, just to add on to what Karen said initially, in some schools, the policy of just talking in English Oh, well, I've experienced that. So prior to working in an international school, I used to work in a public school in New Delhi. And, owing to our colonial past, English is given a lot of importance in India. And growing up, I wasn't a native English speaker. So when I passed my school, I used to struggle with speaking English. And I literally had to build up my English language skills from 16 years of age. But when I joined a school as a teacher, this was a policy. Nobody was allowed to speak in any other language except English. And at the time, in my naivety or ignorance, I made sure that my kids did the same. As a mother, I would encourage them to speak in English, not in Hindi, which is the mother tongue, or some other. We speak Bengali at home as well, which is the mother tongue. And it has resulted in a very interesting change in my children, because now they consider English as their first language and not the native language as their first language. And I have really mixed feelings about it, because a part of me feels proud, all right, they're doing well. But a part of me feels also guilty that they neglect their own mother tongue or native language, which is spoken at home or in the country. So it's a very curious kind of equation in countries where English is generally quite popular and seen as a road to better, opportunities.
Thank you, Nivi. That's a very interesting point of view, very interesting challenges. Now, Jen, what are your thoughts on?
Well, I just wanted to come back to Roxy's. One of her very first points was this idea of if you're going to adopt EMI, to roll it out slowly from a restricted point, if you point it. So I was sort of thinking of like an inverted pyramid, and I've been part of this some time back in a school in Southeast Asia, actually, where we did this. And for us, one of the main key factors was getting the teacher buy-in, but empowering teachers so that they really felt that they were taking charge, if you like, of what they were doing, rather than being told what to do by an external party. So we began very much, as Roxy said, by starting with just one topic area with science, and then adding maths and so forth. But as we went along, as we went up the inverted pyramid, we started to empower those teachers to become ambassadors for the teachers who were then joining them on this journey. So we had them, for example, they were ambassadors, they were giving the positive spin, if you like, on the experience, to say, this is great, come on, join me. But also encouraging other teachers who are then going to come and join in to shadow them. So those teachers were then going into their classrooms to see how it worked, so that they could see it in practice and see the benefits and the whole enriching experience, if you like, of that EMI environment. So we did that. And also the thing that we also built in were these checkpoints, so giving everybody involved an opportunity to stop and think about where they were and how it was going, and what could we learn from this, what could be our future goals, and bringing everybody into that. So bringing the teachers in, the school leaders in, the heads of department in, asking parents if they had anything they wanted to add, and also the students. So those would be my two things, is that inverted pyramid of empowerment, and secondly maybe the checkpoints to make sure everybody feels that they're part of that growing process.
Thank you, Jen. Some great practical advice there, and thank you all. Now to round the session off with a final question. What are your top tips for running an effective English as a medium of instruction classroom? And Jen, I'm going to start with you.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, embrace EMI and all that it brings. But I was just thinking, I made a few notes to myself. I think from the teacher's perspective, I think they need to be aware of their own needs. They need to feel, what do I need? How can I take control? How can I take myself forward? Little tips like keeping diaries, reaching out for support if you need it, not getting to a stage where you feel you're not managing or coping, but don't let that happen. Reach out to others. Setting your own learning goals, thinking about, how am I doing? Where can I go next? What could I develop further about my teaching practice? Again, shadowing other practitioners if you get the opportunity. Things that really build your own needs, but also being kind to yourself. I think when a teacher's put into a new environment like this, they need to have reasonable expectations of themselves, and not to feel that, you know, they have to be able to do everything all in one go. So be kind, I think, is another one I had down. And also knowing your students' needs and attitudes. So thinking about how they feel about being taught in the English language, giving them permission and understanding of when they can translanguage, what they can do, how they can enrich the experience. So those are little things that came to me thinking about the teacher and both the teacher and learner's needs.
Lovely, thank you. Now, Karen, what are your tips?
I think probably the main one for me is to recognise that every teacher is a language teacher. I think that's so important, and following from that, to put in place the support to enable teachers of all curriculum subjects to see themselves in that way, and to be able to provide that support for the students to learn the language alongside the content.
Brilliant, thank you, Karen. Now, Roxy, your tips.
I think my top tip is really to take small steps. You don't have to create this huge English immersive environment all in one go. Just one change a week or even a month towards a bilingual classroom is going to mean that you make progress over time. So it might be that you just choose a couple of phrases that you want to become a routine as part of your classroom. It might be changing some of the displays so that there's a little bit more English around the room to notice, or setting up fun challenges or quizzes, things that children have to do in English rather than in a different language that they enjoy doing. Just by making those little changes, you'll start to see an improvement in your EMI classroom.
Great, Roxy, thank you. And Nivi, what are your final tips?
Well, everything what everyone has said so far. And I think it's also about making that safe space in the classroom where students feel confident to try the English language, keeping in mind the different needs of your students and differentiating your instructions accordingly, so that if children with varying levels of proficiency should feel confident that they can talk in the class in English, they can make a mistake and it's all right. So I think that is very important, because otherwise children are very quick to pick up, be self-critical and then stop responding in the class. So I think that is a very important aspect of a bilingual classroom.
Absolutely wonderful. So that's all we have time for today on our EMI episode. Thank you to Nivi, Roxy, Karen and Jen for being such fantastic guests and sharing some really useful insights. Thank you for listening. We hope you join us again soon.